Hey, Sean, do you know what? I think that our listener want real protection against cyber risk, and I know that High Trust is the leader in cybersecurity assurance. But what makes them the go-to choice?
Well, according to our friends at HITRUST, because their framework covers 100% of the known tactics, techniques, and procedures, in 2024, organizations with a HITRUST certification had just a 0.59% incident rate, meaning 99.41 stayed breach-free.
That's solid, but what about staying sharp over time?
HITRUST regular certification process isn't just a checkbox, it actually drives improvement. Repeat customers see up to 54% fewer corrective actions needed year over year. And now, with their new AI security assessment and certification, you can actually tackle AI risk with confidence as well.
Then check out the iTrust framework. Go to hightrustalliance.net to learn more.
Welcome everybody. We are at RSAC Conference 2025. I have the distinct pleasure of sitting here with Steve Schlarman from Archer Integrated Risk Management.
Yep.
Archer, I like
Archer.
to call it.
Right,
Yes,
right.
But you've been in this space a long time.
Long time.
Archer's been in this space a long time. We're not going to waste time on saying who you are. Well, maybe your role quickly for me.
Yeah, I'm a Senior Director of Product Management. I'm focused really on our risk management portfolio of products.
Right. And there are other portfolios.
And there's our compliance as well.
Exactly. So we'll kind of touch on all of that, but
Yep.
I'm thrilled to have you here. I'm sure many people know of Archer. It's passed with RSA security, deep roots in GRC. No question about that. But you haven't been settled in. You've been busy the last few months.
Yeah, we've been really focused on launching our new platform, Archer Evolv. And we've made the decision to really differentiate it from our previous versions because of some of the things that have happened with Archer as a company, from the time we've spun out from RSA to the technology that we're really innovating on. And we really wanted to emphasize the fact that, as you pointed out, we haven't rested on our laurels.
Yep.
We're really pushing the envelope, and one of the benefits of being in the space for so long is we have great relationships with our clients, so we get lots of great ideas from them, direction, what the challenges that they are facing, and then we can turn around and look at, well, what are the solutions that we can put in place to help them? And so Archer Evolv really represents that turning of the corner. We knew that there was a significant technology innovation coming with AI. And so that drove a lot of our strategies around some of the stuff that we've launched last year and the beginning of this year that really are targeting some of the highest impact areas for GRC teams.
Right. So let's talk about some of those challenges. I mean, we had a chance to sit down with some of the customers during Summit, and that relationship is definitely strong. So you got a lot of feedback in terms of what challenges are. Maybe can you highlight some of those that Evolv is really tackling?
Something that compliance teams have struggled with for many years is the velocity and the nature of changes in the regulatory landscape. And many organizations, they attack it by having people reading the laws, looking at the regulations, looking at the frameworks, writing controls, manually trying to map all that stuff together. And frankly, when I started with Archer, that was one of my roles. And it's time consuming, it's somewhat subjective, it is very manual. And that
human
was
error.
yes, and the fact that the velocity of the changes are that just continue to pile up.
Yeah.
So that's one of the main challenges we went after, and so we acquired a company called Compliance.ai last year, who had been a regulatory tech leader. They've been in that space for about 7 years. They had built an entire methodology and the technology to use AI to monitor regulatory sources, automate that whole process of where the change is coming from, extracting obligations, so they tuned all of their language models towards the language, the vernacular of compliance. So extracting those obligations and then mapping controls. And what they brought to us is an accelerated way to meet that challenge of regulatory change. What we've been able to do over the last 12 months is then integrate that into the traditional GRC processes around compliance management. So policy management, policy change management, control attestations, all of the processes that come after that change from a regulatory perspective.
And speak to me about the change management, because I think you kind of alluded to it, right? If you do something once, you're not done. There's always a constant change.
Yes.
So it's really about managing change management.
It is, and it's the fact that regardless of what industry you're in, there's at least some laws, regulations you're going to have to abide by. Regardless of what administration is in public office, whether it's regulated or deregulated, there always fuels change. Yeah. And so from a pure law, regulatory compliance perspective, there's an ongoing sequence of changes. There's always things that are going out for comment. Speeches that indicate potential changes, or memorandums being published by regulatory bodies that indicate maybe where the direction is. So there's always this kind of process. Secondly, internally, your controls many times are evolving as well, as new technologies come out, as new business processes come online, and so forth. So you have both sides of the equation shifting over time.
Yep. So you've alluded to it, but the way you actually mentioned AI as well. But the role of AI here, especially with the acquisition of the company, how does that really help your clients, and especially global companies that have stuff in different countries, and then of course in the U.S. we even have state level stuff to deal with. How does AI help with that flow of keeping on top of stuff?
So whenever there's a change, typically without the benefit of technology, you have somebody reading through proposed changes, reading through your controls library, reading and reading and reading. And these are not, page turners, and they're not short documents. And so one, you're using a highly skilled resource to do a lot of, I don't want to say grunt work because it's very important to the company, but repetitive type of reading a lot of documents. So
Can you give me an example? Maybe a customer that's had to do it manually, what that looked like, and what they can do now?
So we just worked with a client who estimated that for every obligation, so you can think of a law has multiple obligations. For every obligation, it takes about 100 hours to read it, understand it, interpret it, look at the control environment, look at the business, to then make a decision of what we're going to do about that one obligation. So, and that was their number. They estimated that, and
that's a significant number.
They also estimated that their regulatory landscape had about 40 to 50,000 obligations when they look at it from that perspective. So once we implemented and we looked at that time, it dropped down to literally a few hours per obligation. 1 or 2 hours, because the system was going through all of the proposed changes, pulling out the language that says you should do this, you must do this, or you must appoint a chief privacy officer. Those kind of, just very straightforward obligations, and then presenting that these are the obligations, these are your controls. Do you have a control that maps to that? If so,
and does AI help with that as well?
And AI helps with that as well, analyzes both that. The other interesting thing that we've built is the idea of gaps and conflicts. So you could, for example, the age of consent to opt into a marketing program may be different across different states.
Right.
So you can imagine,
which one do you apply?
Which one do you apply? So we can use AI to say in this state it's 18 years old, in this state it's 16 years old, and then your policy says 17. Okay, so you have a gap, you have a conflict. Which one are you wanting to implement? Do you want to take the most stringent? Do you want to take the route of segmenting by geography? So it basically speeds up that entire process.
I have a lot of questions. We'll see how we get going here. The first one I want to maybe look at is kind of the ROI of controls, which might lead me to the next one depending on where we go here. It's easy. I mean, we're sold controls all the time, right? Ways to mitigate risk, ways to mitigate attack, ways to respond to compromise when it happens. Lots of implementation of controls, which adds complexity to the governance piece, right? And demonstrating compliance. But we might overdo it in some cases. So how do organizations use what you provide to maybe tune and kind of rein in some of the expenses and the team effort that goes into actually managing all that stuff?
So there's different types of controls. You have the controls that you must do. So on the compliance side, if the law says you have to do something, then that's a pretty cut and dried situation. The place where you can adjust is really how much risk do you want to accept or expose yourself to. Now, in the traditional approach to risk management, many companies come up with 5x5 heat maps. They rank a very qualitative or subjective measurement of likelihood and impact. We've taken the tack that really the next evolution of risk assessment is to do it in a quantitative manner. So we've built a very accessible enterprise approach to quantifying loss exposure.
Okay.
And so it replaces the reds, yellows, greens, that kind of subjective measurement of risk with much more tangible measurements. And it's really a more faithful representation of the risk. So when you quantify what the loss exposure could be, you now have a sense of how much I could be impacted by specific risk events.
Does this help with executive level communications?
Absolutely, because hey, you have 5 reds. Which one should we invest in?
Right.
It's very difficult to have that conversation. But when you stack rank them by loss exposure and importance to the business, that helps that first initial conversation. The other thing that we're really expanding is the idea of cost of controls.
Right.
So now when you actually go through the effort, which it is an effort, but the benefits are amazing. When you actually estimate the cost of what these controls, what you have to pay for them, whether it's implementation of a system or it's time and resources, you can now then make the decision, this is how much we're spending on controls.
Right.
This is what the exposure is related to those controls. Are we making a good investment decision?
Right.
And then you're having a very straightforward business conversation of, this is what you could be exposed to, this is how much you're investing, maybe we need to invest more because we want to bring that exposure down.
Right.
Maybe the business feels like we could take on a little more exposure and we're going to move some investment and resources over towards going after business opportunities. And ultimately that's really what a GRC platform should bring you, is that kind of business conversation. It's not check the box, yes, we did this. It is something that really helps the business make a better decision.
Yep. I love it. And I have a dream, and I'm glad you kind of led me to this. I have a dream that security and risk teams have so much information and knowledge about the business that they can really have an impact on how the business functions. So you just gave if we're doing less in managing risk and managing controls, we can do things more strategically in terms of business capabilities, new services and things like that. Have you seen also a shift, and this is my dream, the shift to say, here's how we achieve more business, but here's how we do it in a way that we're not as exposed, that we're not required to have as many controls, that we're not required to sit in front of a SOC all day long because we're not putting so much at risk.
Yeah, we just had a client meeting yesterday where that's the state that they've gotten to.
Okay.
And they've done it through diligence and discipline and really taking the tact of they've costed out their controls, they've implemented quantification with us to help identify that loss exposure, and now it's very similar in the security world. We look for ways to automate the closing down ports and doing all of that operational stuff, which frees up the security operations resources to then focus on maybe emerging threats, maybe some partnering with the business, helping them go after new opportunities, those kind of things that you really want them to do rather than stare at a screen all day. we're seeing that now on the risk and the compliance side.
Cool.
We're having those much more meaningful conversations, and instead of the compliance team reading 1,000 pages of upcoming changes and trying to interpret them, now they're sitting down with the business saying, here's what the obligations are,
right.
Here's what we have in place, what are we going to do to facilitate change
Yes.
to meet these new obligations. Same thing on the risk team. It's here's the exposure, here's what we spend to protect that you against that exposure. Where makes the most sense for us to focus.
Yep.
And that's really what we want to be able to do, is automate those things that we can automate and take off that, free up those resources to have those conversations.
Perfect. Well, as you know, I'm a nerd for risk. Maybe not so much compliance, but it's all connected.
Yeah, yep, it
but
is.
I love having these conversations,
Yeah.
and you're always a treat to chat with, Steve.
Well, thanks for the invitation.
And hopefully everybody enjoyed this conversation. Please do connect with Steve, connect with the Archer team. Look for Archer Evolv, that's EVOLV without the E on the end.
Right.
Of course, we'll include links to all that stuff for everybody.
Yep.
Final word, Steve?
No, I just appreciate you having, and it's nice to be back at RSA conference.
Exactly.
It's been a few years since I've been here, but been here many times. So it's great to see old friends and make some new friends.
Exactly. Very good. Thanks, everybody. Stay tuned. itspmagazine.com/RSAC 25 for all of our coverage. Catch you on the next one.
Hey, Sean, do you know what? I think that our listener want real protection against cyber risk, and I know that HITRUST is the leader in cybersecurity assurance. But what makes them the go-to choice?
Well, according to our friends at HITRUST, because their framework covers 100% of the known tactics, techniques, and procedures, in 2024, organizations with a HITRUST certification had just a 0.59% incident rate, meaning 99.41 stayed breach-free.
That's solid, but what about staying sharp over time?
HITRUST's regular certification process isn't just a checkbox, it actually drives improvement. Repeat customers see up to 54% fewer corrective actions needed year over year. And now with their new AI security assessment and certification, you can actually tackle AI risk with confidence as well.
Then check out the HITRUST framework. Go to hitrustalliance.net to learn more.